Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Brennan and today I'm bringing you Spellbinders Large Die of the Month, July 2024, Snow-Capped Holidays. This is a large die with many dies, many components to pulling this together. You can use them all together or you can use some parts of it. So what I do is I die cut all of it with colored card here and I use it from one book, one pack, so they all coordinate. So it's a rainbow pack, colored pack that I use here. What I do here is I kind of group the dies. So you see all the flower dies I put together, and then you see all the bird dies I put together and the die cuts together. So it's easier for me to compile them or assemble them. I think when you die cut, that's the way to think about it. You need to think about which dies go together, then you can die cut it in the right color, and then you can assemble it accordingly as well. So for this pine cone, you die cut the background, and then you put the two dies together and you die cut the other bit of the die. So it's just different ways to put it together. And some of the colored card, what I do is I add some ink to it just to give it some shadow. So the background, I add some distress ink from Tea-Dye Distress Ink, and for the top layer of the pine cone, I add some Vintage Photo Distress Ink just to give it a little bit of shadow, a bit of variation. If not, it can look a little bit flat. I don't do this for all the die cuts. I do it for quite a bit of it, especially the foliage. I add some additional ink to it. So because it's quite a thin die cut, the top layer of the pine cone, I just dot the liquid glue on it, some dots on it, not too much. And if you think you've put too much, you can always press it onto a scrap paper so it doesn't smudge. So there you go. I've done this, and you see the one on the right, I didn't do any inking. So it looks a little bit flat. So I just want to show you the difference. You don't have to, but it's nice to do a little bit of shadow to the pine cone and you get a little bit of a differentiation. Here I'm using some distress ink to add some color or some shadow to the bird. So I add a bit to the body of the bird, and then I add more of a color, the aged mahogany distressed ink, to the feathers of the bird as well as the top layer of it. Now it really depends on you, the top layer of the bird, whether you want it as part of the bird or it can be a little hat. You can put a little bobble at the top, so it can be like a Santa hat. It's really up to you. For the eye here, what I'm doing here is I'm removing the eye of the bird onto a post-it, and then I'm just coloring it with a black marker, putting some double-sided tape behind the die cut of the top of the bird, and I'm going to insert the little bit tiny die cut of the eye, which using the media picker tool crystal from Katana, really handy. I use a liquid glue to attach all of these various die cuts, so I think it's easy for me to put that in. And this media picker tool is so handy when using tiny die cuts to assemble each of the pieces. I really hope you enjoyed the video and you see it as a guide on how to put this die set together. Now you can be as creative as you want. So the way I've put some of these feathers together on the bird, you can interchange them. This is how it's meant to go together. This is how it's designed, but it doesn't mean you have to stick that way. You can put additional feathers on both birds and just give it a bit more of a flair. It's totally up to you. I hope you really find it instructive and informative on how to initially put them together. So when I start a die set, what I tend to do is I initially put them together as how I think it should be or how it shows on the package, and then I get a little bit more creative. So in this video, you'll see me do 2 cards where I put all the elements in, and I do another 2 cards which is more simplistic. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And when you do subscribe, remember to press that notification bell so you're alerted when new videos are uploaded. I do tutorial videos for the Spellbinders club kits for most of the club kits on a monthly basis, and once I've done the videos, I tend to put them into a playlist, so you've got all the Spellbinders club kits videos for that month in one playlist, so it's easier to refer to, and when you get your club kits delivered to you, you can refer to that playlist and you have all of them together. I think it's just easier, and I've got some good feedback in having them all together, and I hope it's really inspirational and helpful. I also do tutorial videos for the core collection releases that Spellbinders have on a monthly basis. Sometimes I'm a little bit late with it, but I definitely will release them at the end of the day. Head over to my YouTube channel, Angela Brennan Creations, so you get to see lots of these videos because I primarily do Spellbinders videos. I end up putting quite a few of those die cuts onto my sticky mat on the stamp wheel. You can use any sticky mat. There's quite a few sticky mats in the market, but because I have a stamp wheel, and I must say I primarily use the stamp wheel to do ink blending, and it's really handy so you can keep the die cuts in its place and do ink blending. I do lots of ink blending for almost all of them, and that takes time. And once you've got all of your die cuts ready, then you can start with the assembly. With the little oval circle or the window in the middle of the birdhouse, there's two options here. You can use the two die cuts and attach it this way, or what I do is I use the larger die cut and I just ink blend it. So I use tea dye as the main color, and then I use vintage photo to give it that shadow that die cut, the second die cut will give it. So it's really up to you. So you can use either die cut and you can see whichever suits the assembly that you want to do, and I tend to go with the ink blended version. Now I'm putting the die cuts together. Now this second part on the side of the birdhouse, for the second card, I use a lighter color. You could use a lighter color or a darker color just to show a little bit of differentiation to the next dimension of the birdhouse. It's really, really simple to put the birdhouse together. In fact, to put them all together because it's really guided, but all these etched lines on the die cut, so you can see even here you can see the etched lines and how you put the roof onto it, and the way the design of these dies, it makes it easy to die cut as well as to assemble. So just step by step, patience. And as I always say, the hardest part of putting these dies together or these die sets together for me is choosing the colors. Once you choose the colors, even after you've chosen them, you might change your mind later on. As you've seen, I do change my mind when I put a card together, and then you need to think of the background, etc. So it's choosing the colors. And once you get the hang of what goes to where, honestly, after your first card, you will start having loads of ideas come through. As I said, you don't have to use all the dies or all the die cuts to put it into one card. I do end up showing you a couple of cards where you can make it a little bit simpler and just use a few elements of this die set. Once you've die cut and inked all of the die cuts, and I always do extra die cuts, so when you're assembling the card, you've got extra die cuts for like foliage and flowers and even the birds. I've done some extra colors here for additional cards that I'll do later on. Once you get in the zone of doing the die cutting and ink blending, it's a little bit hard to stop. And now you start thinking of the background. So I'm doing some ink blending here, and this is how I store my foam pads for my distress inks. And I'll put the link for that in the below because I find it really handy when you've got a good storage solution that is easy to access and put away. You will tend to use your inks more often, and this is a great storage solution for me, and I'll just share that in the description below if you want to use it. So I've just used all of that distress inks that I have, and I have lots of distress inks to do the background. Per usual, when I do ink blending, 3 core ingredients that you need is the right card, and here I use the Strathmore Bristol Smooth card. Use domed foam, which is easier to do ink blending, and just ensure that your ink pads are nice and juicy. So that when I see the tumble glass ink pad is a little bit dry, I do use my refill to re-ink the ink pad so it's nice and juicy when I'm doing my ink blending. If not, it just makes for a really, really difficult ink blending. And if you try to force it, you might spoil the surface of the ink pad as well as your foam pad. So make sure your ink pads are adequately re-inked to make the ink blending process nice and smooth. storage solution allows for the foam pads to be put away just as easily in the right way, so it's easy to get to it the next time you want to use it. And that's how you need your storage solutions to be. Per usual, I spread some water in the back of the inked panel, and here I'm doing a debossed image, so I'm putting it through my embossing folder of the month through the machine, and I get an amazing image that is beautiful. And after that, I decide to add some additional distress ink on it very lightly, so it just gets the raised part of it and it leaves the depressed or impressed image on its own, so you get a little bit of variation of color to the debossed image of the card front. I always ink and emboss the card panel slightly bigger than the card front, so ensure that it's going to be flush against the card front. And this is an A6 card which measures 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters, which is a popular card in the UK. And then I just cut off the excess. This way I ensure that the embossed panel is going to be flush on the card front. Now, when I put the birdhouse die cut onto the A6 card, I feel it's a little bit too squished. So I decide to use it onto an A7 card which measures 5 inches by 7 inches. And I use the A6 card and another card that I'll do later on in the video. The clear stamp of the month has some amazing Christmas sentiments, and I like the fact it's got a large cursive sentiment with a script sentiment that is smaller, and I tend to use them together in quite a few of my cards. Not in just this one, in my previous video where I showcased the small die of the month, I did the same thing because I think it just goes so well together when you've got a larger sentiment that is cursive and you've got a script sentiment that is smaller. Just a personal preference. For the sentiments, I stamp it with clear embossing ink, sprinkle some superfine white embossing powder. Once I've sprinkled the embossing powder, I use a dry paintbrush to remove all the stray embossing powder before I start heat embossing it, and I use the Wow dual speed heat tool to melt the embossing powder, and then I will use the coordinating dies to die cut the sentiments. When there is sentiments and there's a coordinating die, I do additional die cuts of the sentiment so I can layer them up and give the sentiment some dimension when I attach it to the card front. I know the card front looks quite busy. It's busier than I would normally have on my card front, but I wanted to show you how I can put all of the die cuts from the die set together and how you can put a card together. I'm going to show you another card here where I don't use all of the die cuts from the die set, but I use much fewer of the dies and create just as beautiful a card. Now this is the A6 card front that I didn't use earlier. Pretty straightforward, but I think it's a great set for versatility where you can have a busy card front with more elements of the birdhouse, etc., or you can have something simpler with just the cute birds. Here's a simpler card that I've done with just a couple of birds, a branch and some foliage, and of course the clear stamp of the month sentiments. I use the clear stamp of sentiments for all of the cards because I think they fit so perfectly with a theme. And that's the thing about Spellbinders Clubkits. When they do a theme, it all goes together. I'm using the Splatter White Opaque watercolor to do some splatter on the card front, just like a little bit of a snowfall, snowflake kind of thing, something really light, and it just stands out against the darker blue of the background, and I think it goes to snowflake theme as well. Here I'm doing another card where for the roof, I'm just putting some liquid glue in some roof tile kind of a shape and sprinkling some glitter onto it, so you know how the snow will stick to the shape of the roof tiles. I'm trying to mimic that with the glitter and the liquid glue, just for some variation here. And I do another card with the birdhouse, but this time around the background I'm going to use some cloud stencils to give it a little bit of a differentiation before I do some embossing with the Hexy Snowflake embossing folder. I'm also doing a little bit of a tiny shaker on the window of the birdhouse. Really tiny one. And I'm doing a slightly different way of doing the shaker card where I'm going to put another acetate at the back so I can just make sure that the shaker card is completed. But before I finish that, I also put another colored card behind it because I want the window to have a little bit of a color behind it. Here I'm preparing the background of the card using Strathmore Bristol Smooth Card with a cloud stencil. Once I've done the stenciling with the cloud stencil, I will emboss it with the Hexy Snowflake embossing folder. So just to give it a little bit of an extra, so you've got the snowflake and the cloud image as well. Here's another card I've done without all the other elements of the die set, but just a few elements of the die set. Here are all the completed cards. I really hope you found this video inspirational and gives you a guide on how to use all the dies that come with the die set and how you can even create some beautiful cards without using all the dies in the die set. I think the foliage that comes with this die set is quite priceless in the sense that you can use it in many other different cards, especially winter themed cards. And I think it's really good to have those kind of dies in your stash. Thank you so much for stopping by, and do check out the close-up pictures of all the cards I've created, and I hope you're inspired and enjoy your Spellbinders Club kits when they do arrive. Remember, you can put in your subscriptions for your Spellbinders Club kits between the 6th and 27th of every month. They only will be available as long as there is stock. Happy crafting, and I'll catch you at my next video. Do take care.